Stephan Pastis, Looking Up. Chapter 1. Pin the tail on the Daniel. You know you're a square peg in a round world when you find you're the only person at a birthday party defending the piñata. As I had the tailless donkey and the gnome-themed cake, for I was a sucker for anything with a face. Its salvation, my destiny. And no face required saving more than the round one belonging to Daniel Chance McGibbons, round face, who had to keep being reminded by his father to stop drawing and at least talk to the other kids at the birthday party, as it was his birthday party. But the act of talking seemed to pain him almost as much as the pummeling of the piñata pained me, though I didn't know why. For as much as I admired the shape of his adorably round face, I knew next to nothing about him, other than the fact that he lived across the street from me, which was the only reason I'd even been invited to this gathering of what were otherwise just his classmates, who, truth be told, appeared to know as little about Daniel as I did, aside from the obvious, like the fact that he was the only kid any of us knew who walked with a cane, which I thought only old people used, and which may have been the cause of his shyness. But whether it was the cane or just an aversion to social events, Daniel's absence as host and birthday boy left a void that could be felt by all, most notably his father, who seemed as graceful and sociable as Daniel was not, and who wanted Daniel to participate in his birthday party not so much for the sake of Daniel, but for his own desire not to be embarrassed around the other parents. And, sensing Daniel's distress, I stepped in to fill the void, for having ostracized myself among this group of strangers by attempting to save the piñata, donkey, and gnome, I had little left to lose. And so I climbed atop a bar stool in the living room and waxed eloquent on the benefits of shopping local, and the merits of print journalism, and the pitfalls of birthday hats upon soft, malleable hair, none of which seemed to connect with my peers. And so I tried to be slightly more topical by saying a few kind words about the birthday boy, who I could see had been standing behind the other kids, as he had been made to do by his father. But because I knew so little about him, I could only talk about what I'd seen, so I praised his resilience, the cane, his creativity, the drawing, and his listening skills, his silence, and did not notice until it was too late that each time I said his name, he was taking one giant step backward, as though each word of praise were somehow a lance to the belly, until he was left standing with his back against the wall, pinned there by unintentional cruelty, like the donkey without a tail. And seeing that I had unwittingly hurt the only round face I'd sought to save, I did the only noble thing I could. I grabbed the piñata and fled. Chapter 2. Excuses, Excuses. The first thing you gotta know about me is that even though my name is Saint, I wasn't named for a bearded guy in heaven. I was named for a football team in Louisiana. And the second thing you gotta know about me is this. My mother breaks all her promises. Saint, I have a work lunch. On a Saturday? Yep. So tell them you're sick. I can't. Tell them your daughter's sick. Saint, please. Tell them you broke her heart and now she's sneezing uncontrollably. Sweetheart, I've got it. Tell them your daughter is allergic to broken promises. Achoo! 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 My mother knelt on one knee in front of me. You know I didn't promise you, Saint. I'd said I'd go if I could. Sounds like a promise to me. Please don't make me feel worse than I already do. You? How about how I feel? It's a parent-child egg toss. I can't do it without you. Honey, the flyer says it's the first annual egg toss, which means they'll do it every year. So we'll do it next year. But next year is 1,000,000 years away, I shouted. The sky could fall and crush us all by then. I doubt that. Yeah, well, don't be so sure. Those stars appear to have very little support. Hang on, she said, walking to the hall closet and bringing back an umbrella. What's that for? I asked as she opened the umbrella and handed it to me. Take it for when you leave the house. It's not raining. Not for the rain. The stars. They'll hit it and just bounce off. Ping, ping, ping. Now, maybe that sounds funny to you, but to me, it was just about the most aggravating thing I'd ever heard, which you wouldn't have known by all my giggling. I heard that, said my mother. And that's the thing about my mother. Whenever you get really angry about something, she goes and makes you laugh, even if you don't want to. I'm still angry, I said. You're giggling. It's an angry giggle. Well, while you angry giggle, I have to go meet a client, she said, grabbing her car keys. And so I made one last attempt to change her mind. You know it's for like $100,000, right? She stopped and turned around. What's for $100,000? The egg toss. Sweetie, I don't think the winner gets $100,000. Well, maybe not $100,000, but they get a shopping spree at Punch's Toy Farm, and that's pretty much worth $100,000. All the toys you can grab in 5 minutes. I even know the order I'd grab everything. I have the entire layout of the store memorized. She walked back toward me. I'll tell you what. How about I buy you something from Punch's next week, but it's going to have to be something small. I have just enough cash to buy gas for the car. She kissed me on the top of my head, which was always her way of telling me a conversation was over. You promise? I asked. Promise, she said. Hang on. Saint, I have to go. I ran to my room and came back with a piñata, not the one I had taken from Daniel's birthday party, but one I had taken from a different party, as I had a habit of saving piñatas. Swear on the piñata's head, I said, setting it in front of her. It was a ritual we performed whenever a promise was sacred and unbreakable, for no one could lie before a creature as fragile as a piñata. Saint, please, fine. And so she touched the top of the piñata's head. I swear on the piñata's head, she said. And while we're promising things, how about you promise you'll get your chores done? The dishes aren't going to wash themselves. Fine, I said, but first, I want to go to the park and watch the egg toss anyway. See what undeserving soul gets the $100,000. No, first you're doing the dishes. Fine. And what? If you do go, Saint, try to be a good sport. I know what you're like when you're disappointed. I promise. But I hadn't touched the piñata's head. And she didn't know what punches meant to me. Chapter 3, Nightly Prayers. Punch's Toy Farm sat like an old tired mule on the corner of my street and Miguel Avenue, exactly 1,605 steps away from my front door. I've counted. And don't ask me why it was called Punch's Toy Farm. Because the owner was not named Punch, and it was in no way a farm. No cows or chickens. But those branding difficulties were the least of its problems, for the old building was plagued by a whole host of issues, including but not limited to a leaky roof, broken air conditioning, and wooden floors so warped you could drop a marble in the Barbie aisle and watch it roll all the way to the front door, which only made me love it more. For those deficiencies were a testament to how long Punch's had endured, a reminder that the store came not from the present but the past. And the past was the place I liked the best, a feeling shared by the store's only employee, whose name was Muffins. Muffins was an 86-year-old curmudgeon who loathed children, smelled like cigarettes, and had fingers far too long for his hand. And despite being the store's only employee, Muffins spent very little time in the store itself, which meant that if you were a new customer and needed help, you weren't going to find it. But if you were a veteran shopper, you knew to walk to the back of the store, step over the dusty stacks of shipping receipts, and push open the emergency exit that told you not to do that very thing, for the alarm had long since been disabled by Muffins, who you would then find behind the store in a rusty lawn chair, spitting sunflower seed shells into a tin bucket. Ping! But finding Muffins was only half the battle, for then you had to know the rules of engagement, like avoiding small talk. Instead, you were just to say what kind of toy you were looking for, and be brief. Especially when he asked the only question he'd ever ask. Homework finito? Which was his way of inquiring if your homework was done, because if it wasn't, your shopping was. But if you said yes, and I always said yes, you had to sign a form, which he appeared to have tailored specifically for me. Form of truth. My homework has been completed. I swear this on the heads of my sacred piñatas. Saint. Now, I don't remember even telling him about my piñatas, especially given that you weren't supposed to be chatting with him in the first place. Though maybe I had, or maybe he just had the power to read people's minds. Anyhow, the point is that when all those formalities were concluded, the ballerina-like grace of Muffins kicked in. For he would spit his last shell into the bucket, and as the ping of the bucket rang, Muffins would slip silently back into the store, where he'd slither through tight aisles, stand upon a squeaky footstool, and reach with his long bony fingers into shelves crammed 3 rows deep with toys, to find not just the toy you wanted, but the one you needed. And for me, that expertise was a must, because of what I collected, and that was knights. I had always been drawn to knights for their honor and decency, and for the way they protected the many damsels in distress, sort of like how I protected piñatas. I was also drawn to their boldness, and the fact that they were rarely troubled by the what-ifs of a perilous situation, because if they did ever fail, which was rare, they could always just cover their face. Who's onto there? No idea. But I didn't collect just any knight figurines, for I had no interest in the cliché ones swinging swords and clanging shields, all of which could be easily bought from any cookie-cutter chain store. Meh. Instead, I collected just one particular pose, and that was the knight bent upon one knee. This one. Now, I don't know what the toy makers had in mind with that specific pose, i.e. whether the guy was proposing to a maiden or had simply dropped his house keys, but I knew what I had in mind. And that was that those knights were asking the gods for help with slaying the dragons, not by violent means, which is also cliché, but by non-violent means. And so on my shelf at home, you would often find a praying knight surrounded by dragons who had died of old age and poor hygiene. Fatal halitosis. Now, given my love for anything with a face, you might think it's hypocritical of me to feel that way about dragons, but consider this. Those reptiles were going around breathing fire onto knights, which to me is crossing an ethical line. And besides, if you really want to get technical, knights have faces too. So that's where the ethics of this get murky. Anyhow, the point is that I couldn't collect any more of those praying knights without the genius of Muffins, whose skill at his chosen profession was so profound as to be almost supernatural. An encyclopedic knowledge of toys paired with an ability to see into customers' souls. And after he'd helped me find just the right knight, he would take the toy to the register, next to which there was a rack of picture books, many with castles and knights, and so while he was ringing me up, I'd always throw in one of those just to expand my knowledge base. Then I'd gather up all the coins I had gotten from selling lemonade outside my house and pay, and cash was the only way to pay. For the store had tried to install a credit card reader, but Muffins had made sure it did not survive its first day. Then Muffins would hand me my change and say the only thing he ever did say, "Don't slam the darn door, dingo!" And then I would leave, and Muffins would return to his chair. And all of that is a long way of saying that I really wanted to win that egg toss, but couldn't because of my mother, and so I went to the event anyway, and responded to the disappointment in the most mature way I could think of, by chucking eggs at a tree.